What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I wanted to bring you a card discussion on Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon. This is a really interesting card that just got announced and is going to be released in the Legendary Dragon decks. Now, a lot of people are hyping up this card because this card's effect is really awesome, but I wanted to kind of discuss it more in depth and maybe change some notions and dispel some of the initial hype that's surrounding this card as it currently stands. So, for those of you who don't know, Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon is a level 10 light machine fusion effect monster with 0 attack and 0 defense. It requires 1 Cyber Dragon monster and 1 or more monsters in the extra monster zone, and that's really interesting. So the effect reads, cannot be used as a fusion material, must be fusion summoned from your extra deck by sending the above cards from either field to the graveyard. You do not use polymerization. The original attack of this card becomes 1200 times the number of fusion materials used for its special summon. Okay, so right off the bat, if you guys are familiar at all with Chimeratech Fortress Dragon, this card essentially pays homage to Fortress Dragon, but takes a new spin on how Fortress Dragon works. A lot of the time in the past, we've seen people tech in Cyber Dragon against a machine-heavy meta so that they can play stuff like Fortress Dragon and pretty much clear the board of all of their opponent's threats. We saw this kind of hype around Cosmo, as well as like Girgia and like Machina and all these other weird kind of machine decks that people tried out, and it was really effective against something like Cosmo because you were able to prevent the machines from getting triggered, especially since they weren't targetable and triggered when they were destroyed and sent to the graveyard. So Fortress Dragon has had its ins and outs of different formats, but this card pretty much takes a whole new spin on that because rather than using machine type monsters, it uses monsters that are in the extra monster zone. And keep in mind that it says that are on either player's field. Now I know that the extra monster zone is kind of shared by both players, but that means that if your opponent has monsters in the extra monster zone, if you have a Cyber Dragon, you're able to contact fuse using your opponent's extra monster in the extra monster zone as fusion material, and you're able to summon Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon. So that's pretty neat, being able to clear your opponent's monsters in that way. But there's also another card, or I should say a series of cards that we have that already do that rather effectively, and that is the Kaijus. Kaijus have been around for a while now and have pretty much been our go-to option for removing big threats, but especially boss monsters. And since a lot of boss monsters do originate from the extra deck, it kind of just happens that, you know, Kaijus are the perfect fit for a lot of these situations and are kind of a jack of all trades when you're talking about removing big threats from the board. So when it comes to Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon, I feel that comparing it to Kaijus is actually very fair, because what it really boils down to is this something you're going to want to play instead of a Kaiju? So let's go ahead and discuss that a little bit more in depth. Well, the thing is with Kaijus is that when you're playing with Kaijus in your main deck, you just have to play the Kaijus, whereas if you're playing Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon, you have to not only be playing Cyber Dragons in place of those Kaiju monsters, but you also need to be playing X number of Chimeratech Megafleet Dragons in your extra deck, and depending on how tight the space is in your extra deck, depending on the deck that you're playing, you might not have the space to relinquish to play something like Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon, and obviously if you're having to relinquish those spaces just so you can fit this card in there, then obviously it probably makes more sense that Kaijus are probably the better option in that circumstance. Another thing too is that Kaijus can be used at any time. You know, you're just dropping the Kaiju on your opponent's monster, and pretty much there isn't a whole lot they can do about it. The thing is though, with Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon, you need to actually have no monsters in your possession if you want to special summon that Cyber Dragon to the field and be able to contact fuse for Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon. You could also tribute summon the Cyber Dragon out, but you have to waste your normal summon just to remove your opponent's threat. So is that really worth it? I don't think so, and I feel like that's a really steep stipulation that Kaijus just do a lot better when it comes in comparison to Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon. Another thing too is that Kaijus can hit any monster. Kaijus don't care if the monster came from the extra deck, the main deck, the side deck, like who gives a fuck. Kaijus can hit anything, but the thing is with Megafleet, it has to specifically not only hit extra deck monsters, but it has to hit monsters that are in the extra monster zone, and that's even more of a restriction than I initially first thought, because when I first read this card, I actually thought that it said just extra deck monsters, period, and if that was the case, this card would be absolutely fucking insane, and we'd be having a completely different discussion about this card in general. But the fact that it has to be monsters that are in the extra monster zone really puts a heavy restriction on this card, because if you think about it, that means you can only have a maximum of 2 other fusion materials since there's only 2 extra monster zones, and I think that's really unfortunate because that really stifles the potential that this card could have possibly had. But if it was the other way around and could hit extra deck monsters in general, this card might be a little bit too fucking broken. But regardless, we're going to keep moving on. Another thing is that Kaijus are an inherent summon. Now, arguably Cyber Dragon is also an inherent summon as well, and the contact fusion of summoning Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon is also an inherent summon, but the thing you need to realize is the time after you special summon your Cyber Dragon to the field, your opponent has the opportunity to interact and possibly remove that Cyber Dragon from the field before you have priority back in your favor, or the game state returned to your favor, in order to properly contact fuse and remove your opponent's threats from the board. So whereas Kaijus pretty much can't be stopped under any circumstances, your opponent actually does have that small window of opportunity that if they want to remove the Cyber Dragon, if they anticipate you're going to be going in with a Megafleet Dragon, which really, unless you're playing Cyber Dragons, there'd be no other fucking reason to play Cyber Dragon in your deck in the first place. If your opponent has a way to clear the Cyber Dragon from the board, then they're definitely going to fucking do that. Otherwise, they're about to lose whatever monster they may have in the extra monster zone. Now, I know I've been kind of favoring Kaijus in this discussion so far, but I do want to talk about some of the strengths that Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon has as well. One strength that it has is that it could possibly absorb more than one monster. Let's say, for instance, your opponent extra links you, and you don't have the ability to use your extra monster zone. Well, if you special summon your Cyber Dragon, you have the ability to absorb both monsters that are in the extra monster zone, making Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon 3600 attack, which is pretty beefy, and at the same time, you're also freeing up the extra monster zones, or at least one of them, since Chimeratech Megafleet's going to go in one of them, but then you have that freed up, so now you're not completely locked under the extra link. The thing is, though, Kaijus can also break an extra link because you can choose which monster that is currently conducting the extra link that you want to get rid of for the tribute summon of the Kaiju, and then the Kaiju goes to the main monster zone, and then the extra link is broken. So if you want to free up one of your extra monster zones, you can tribute that monster out of there, give them the Kaiju, and basically have achieved the same thing without having to play Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon. Another thing, too, is that with Megafleet Dragon, as opposed to a Kaiju, you're getting the monster. One of the biggest drawbacks about Kaijus is that they are inherently a -1 in terms of card advantage. You're giving your opponent a card, even though it's replacing one of their cards, but you're not getting really anything out of it. Whereas Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon, you're actually getting the monster while removing your opponent's monsters simultaneously. So, because you're playing Cyber Dragon's going to replace itself with Megafleet, so you pretty much 1-for-1, but you also remove the threats from your opponent's board. But is that really worth having that one extra monster, basically compared to all the negatives that Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon has in comparison to a Kaiju, which I think at the end of this video, a lot of us would conclude that Kaijus essentially do what Megafleet does, but they just do it in a much better way. I think the card design around Megafleet is really cool, but I think it's pretty much, since we have Kaijus already, there really isn't a purpose that this card serves, other than the fact that you could possibly clear multiple monsters, and the argument to be made that you're getting the card advantage over your opponent. But with all the other drawbacks the card has, Kaijus, in my opinion, are infinitely better, but that's just my opinion. Let me know down in the comments what your guys' thoughts are about Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon as a whole. The artwork is sick, it's amazing Cyber Dragon support, so if you are a Cyber Dragon fan, you're gonna absolutely love this card, but I really just wish it was pushed a little bit further. I wish it said all monsters special summon from the extra deck, because then that would make it worth it. If you could just basically Raigeki your opponent's board with a Cyber Dragon, that would be fucking crazy. But again, maybe that might be a little bit too broken, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments below. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video informative, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.